What's up, everybody? Got back from the Spanish Grand Prix very late last night. I think I got home at 3 o'clock in the morning after flight delays on the way back from Barcelona, but great to be back. Not the most exciting race, was it? But we've had four crackers, or we've definitely had three crackers up to now, so you're always going to get some that just don't work out. Barcelona is not a circuit that is very easy to overtake on, and we've seen in the past you can get some dull events there. So not the highlight of the season, let's say, but still plenty to talk about. Now today is Q&A day, as you know. Thank you very much to everybody who sent all the questions in. I got so many questions. I mean, so many on Twitter, on the YouTube channel, on Instagram, all over the place. Questions coming from all sorts of places. So that's great. So thank you very much. Lots of input and lots to go on. I'm going to try and rattle through them so this doesn't become an incredibly long video, which the last Q&As have been. So let's fly through some of these. Grey Zero, thank you very much for your question. Who's the best technical director or engineer you ever worked with? Got to be Adrian Newey. Not because it was the most enjoyable experience working for Adrian, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. It's just that he was so focused on what he was doing, on his aerodynamics, that everything else had to be compromised to fit into his aerodynamic concept that he was working on. And more often than not, he was proved that it was the right concept. And his record, you just cannot argue with his record over the year. He has won so much. He has triumphed in so many different regulation changes that it's very difficult to argue that the way he does things is not the right way. So brilliant, brilliant guy, very clever guy, and actually a really nice guy too. Tomo Miles says, what I'd like to know, Elvis, is when teams design their cars, how much knowledge do they have of where their cars will be fast? So do they sacrifice performance at certain circuits, knowing that they're going to be better at others for a maximum championship position? He says, I hope that makes sense. It does make perfect sense. It's a good question. I don't actually think that they specifically target certain tracks, but more what they'll do is they'll look at the calendar as a whole, they'll look at the tracks that we go to as a whole, and try to find a solution with the designing of their car that maximises the average, if you like, of all of those. There are obviously a few anomalies. There are things like Monaco and perhaps Monza, which are the sort of extremes at either end. A very high downforce, a very low downforce, very fast and a very slow circuit. You can't really design a car for those tracks. And when I say design a car, I'm talking about the overall concept. What you do for those tracks is pretty much take a different car anyway, because you bring new bodywork, you bring different wings, you bring different cooling inlets. So lots of things do change from race to race. So the car is not one specific car that runs all the way through the season, as you well know. It changes in all sorts of different areas. So they will look at specific packages targeted towards certain tracks, but the overall design concept will be one that they think is best suited to being successful across the season at most circuits. The F1 Vault says, what is your take on involving the drivers in making up the regulations? Could they involve input from engineers from various or all the teams whilst they're at it if they were to go through with this? Well, actually, they do. So, we're in the midst at the moment of trying to assess and work out what the 2021 regulations are going to be. One of the biggest, potentially biggest changes we've had for quite some time. And the teams are, and the FOM are absolutely going around all of the teams, talking to their engineers, understanding what they want from it. Pat Simmons, a friend of mine who, former technical director, is now working with Liberty and FOM on getting some of these regulations for 2021 right, and he has been around every single one of the teams over the last few months, doing exactly that, talking to them, trying to understand their needs, trying to put forward his views on what should happen, and getting feedback from the teams. And that's of course getting feedback from a commercial point of view, from an engineering point of view. The teams will already have input from their drivers, so that is included in that feedback as well. So I actually think they're doing exactly that, which is great to see. I think it's a good thing. We should be doing more of it, perhaps. Okay, this is a question from yesterday's race, and it's from Gonzo GB87. Do you think that Grosjean deserves the penalty from yesterday's race? He clearly didn't mean to spin, who would? But then it seemed as if he tried to stop himself going backwards across the track, although the smoke cloud, of course, didn't really help. Do you know what? When I first looked at that incident, I thought that's a bit harsh, giving him a penalty for that. It was just a racing incident at the start, opening lap of the race. He was avoiding another car. However, when you read the FIA's statement on this, um, Roman Grosjean stated in his the statement that he gave to the FIA or the stewards when they were looking at this, he said that he decided, because of the momentum of the car, he decided to bury the throttle and try and get across the track to the inside. Well, when I read that, I'm not that surprised by the penalty, because what he's saying is he deliberately chose the option to get across the track, where on an opening lap of a Grand Prix where there are cars everywhere at full speed aiming, going left, right and centre, it's almost inevitable you're going to be involved in some sort of impact in that situation. So I know that these things happen in split seconds. It's very difficult. I always hate criticising drivers or teams for making split second high pressure decisions, which that one was. But when he came out in his statement and said that was the reason that it happened, that he deliberately chose to go across the track, which he thought was the best option, it just seems like a crazy decision to me. Never try and cross the racetrack in that scenario. That would be my opinion. But look, it's tough, because a 3 places grid penalty at Monaco, as you know, is even harsher than a 3 place grid penalty perhaps anywhere else, because overtaking's so hard. So he's going to suffer as a result of that, but perhaps it was just one of those split-second decisions that he got wrong. But then saying it to the FIA is perhaps an even bigger mistake. Pablo Rodriguez, what happened in Ocon's pit stop yesterday in Barcelona? The mechanic couldn't fit the tyre, and he was trying to manipulate something in the wheel. Was it the nut? Yes, it was the nut. So the wheels now, every single wheel rim in Formula One permanently has in it housed the new wheel nut. So when the guys do a pit stop, they don't remove the wheel nut, then take the wheel off, put the wheel back on and refit the same wheel nut. Every wheel has a brand new captive nut housed in it. It's retained in there with a little sort of spring clips that hold the wheel nut in. The nut has to float, of course. It can't be rigidly attached. It's got to float. And occasionally those things maybe don't get seated properly. And it looked to me like that's what happened. The mechanic took the wheel back off, was fiddling around with the nut, presumably trying to get it seated back in its housing, or get the clip back in place before he could then refit it to the car. So disastrous situation from a pit stop point of view. But yes, I think that's what he was trying to do. How did you come up with this Twitter name? Stefan 761 Is that your phone number or something? Stefan, you have asked, do you think Sainz will remain at Renault next season? And what will Alonso do next season? Sure, they can fight, but they aren't getting podiums. Such a shame. A great driver like Alonso is driving for 8 points, and that is supposedly good enough. It's not good enough for Alonso. Alonso wants to be winning races. He desperately wants to be winning races. It's part of the reason that he's trying different categories, like the sports cars and like the American racing he did recently, because he wants to give himself another opportunity to have some success in motorsport. So first of all, Sainz, will he remain at Renault? I think that largely depends on Daniel Ricciardo, because the Daniel Ricciardo situation, I actually expect him to leave Red Bull probably. I can see him going to Mercedes, Daniel Ricciardo. Don't think anything's set in stone by any means yet, but if Daniel Ricciardo moves on, which we probably think he may well do, then I think Carlos Sainz is the next in line for that Red Bull seat, which means he would be recalled. He's only on Renault at loan at the moment, of course. He would be recalled back to that Red Bull team. As for Alonso, also out of contract at the end of this year, not being talked about that much, is it? All the talk is about Bottas, Kimi, Ricciardo, Lewis Hamilton. Fernando Alonso is also out of contract. Do you know what? I'm not sure. I wouldn't be too surprised if he hangs his Formula One boots up at the end of this season. I don't know. I have no real evidence for that. But as you point out, Stefan, he is in a car that is not capable of winning races at the moment. He's been promised for many years now that might be coming, and it just hasn't. and he's starting to have some success and certainly a lot more enjoyment from racing in other categories. Perhaps he could go and do a full-time WEC season or a full-time season across a number of championships, possibly America as well. So I don't know. I really don't know on that one, but that's my gut feeling. Marco Fernandez says, "Hi Mark, what kind of work does a mechanic do overnight to massively improve the performance of the car, as we can see happening with Vettel's car?" That question, of course, came in over the course of this weekend. Well, the mechanics, what they do is that mechanics work very closely with the engineers and the driver to try and maximise whatever they've got. So if they turn up on a Friday, the car starts running in practice and the driver's not happy, or there are elements of the performance of the car that are not working properly, the data analysts will start looking into the data. They'll start analysing it in minute levels of detail. They'll have discussions with the engineers, say, look, we found this on the data that could be improved. The engineers will start looking at the various systems that we have to play with. They will start suggesting some ideas that could be changed to alter some of the characteristics of the car. And the mechanics, of course, work in conjunction with them to then change those parts to make that happen. So the mechanics are the ones who are affecting the changes on the car. The engineers and the data guys are the ones who are searching for the problems together with the driver's feedback and therefore trying to find solutions to those problems. It's always a compromise. So if someone comes in and says, look, we've got understeer, terrible understeer through the first sector of this racetrack, it's not as simple as just changing something to reduce understeer, because that will have probably an adverse effect somewhere else around the racetrack and introduce another problem. So these setup changes that are being made, things like suspension height adjustments, ride height adjustments, camber adjustments where we lean the wheels in, tyre pressure adjustments, ballast adjustments, all sorts of different things. These cars are infinitely adjustable almost. Everything has to be done with a view to what other problems or what other effects it will have to the car. So it's not ever just as simple as saying, right, I've got this problem, that's easy, let's do this to fix it. You have to then work out what impact it will have somewhere else around the car or somewhere else around the lap. But that's what the mechanics are doing. They are changing the parts, they're servicing the parts, they're stripping the car down at the end of a day, looking for any problems, inspecting things, and then making those adjustments, talking to the driver, making sure he's comfortable in the car, in the seat, in the steering position, the pedals position, making any of those adjustments to ensure that the driver's as comfortable as he can be. So those are the things that are happening, and it's a collaborative team effort. It's not just the mechanics, it's not just the engineers, and it's not just the driver. It has to be all of those people working together with each other. 97 ERP says, why do teams sandbag in practice? Do you know what? I don't really believe that sandbagging happens, to the extent that people think it does. They think they do. I know everyone thought Ferrari was sandbagging in practice in Barcelona on Friday, because then they had some more performance on Saturday. I don't think that's sandbagging. Sandbagging, if you're not familiar with the term, is when comes from the wording comes from putting a bag of sand in the car to weigh it down and slow its performance down, so you don't give any performance away to the opposition, or give your pace away to the opposition. And then at the last moment when you need to go quickly, you take the bag of sand out, the car's lighter, and off it goes. Obviously, they don't do that in literal terms, but there are ways to slow a car down or speed it up. You can take the fuel out, you can put more fuel in, you can change your engine modes and that kind of thing. So you can do that. You can limit your own performance if you need to. But look, we were in Barcelona this week, a track that last time we went there, it was freezing cold temperatures and snow. The track's been completely resurfaced. The tyres are all different. Why would anybody not run a normal program, desperately trying to understand their own car and work out what performance they've got? Nobody at this stage of the season is confident enough in their own car to be able to not run through a regular program on a Friday and work out and assess their own performance. So I don't think that's what was happening. I think, they found some performance overnight on a Friday, on Friday night up until Saturday, which was great, but that's perfectly normal. That's exactly what Formula One weekends are all about. It's about getting a base point on Friday, gradually building up to what you hope will be your peak performance by the time it comes to qualifying in the race. Right, let's finish with this one. I didn't actually screenshot the question because so many people asked this one. And it was about the new Pirelli tyres that we had in Barcelona. The question essentially was, did Pirelli bring a new type, thinner tread depth type of tyre to this race because it suited Mercedes and they wanted to manipulate the championship? Absolutely not. The reason that the thinner tread depth tyre came to Barcelona, and we're talking about 0.4 of a millimetre thinner, almost nothing. That came to this race. It'll also come to some others that have been relayed with the new asphalt, because those circuits and that new asphalt was such high grip at times that in pre-season testing, lots of cars were blistering their tyres because of overheating, because the bulk of rubber on that tyre was overheating, having had so much grip and essentially going so much faster around the lap. So therefore, a number of teams, but led by 3 teams, went to Pirelli to try and ask if they could do something about it to alleviate this problem. Because the blistering that was happening, that was overheating, or being caused by the overheating, was so bad they were unusable. Those 3 teams were Mercedes, they were McLaren, and they were Ferrari. So Ferrari also pushed very hard to have this change implemented. So that should immediately wipe out the conspiracy theorists. And I think it's just coincidence that they brought them here. They'll be bringing them again to Silverstone, which has also been relayed, and I think Paul Ricard in France as well. So they brought this tyre along, and yes, it had some slightly different characteristics with a thinner tread depth. Perhaps it allowed the rubber to move less on some of those tyres, and perhaps Mercedes found that easier to manage. But it's certainly not contrived to try and bring the championship alive that lots of people are saying to me on Twitter and Instagram. So I don't think we've reached a point in the season where Mercedes are utterly now dominant, are going to run away with it. I think we've still got a close championship on our hands, and it could still swing either way. Monaco, up next, is a circuit that Mercedes in recent times have struggled at. And Ferrari have been, much more dominant. Red Bull, of course, love going to Monaco. I really think anything could happen there. So this championship is not done and dusted by any stretch of the imagination. Right, thank you very much for all the questions. Got so many. Sorry if I didn't get to them all. Thank you also to everybody who shared the F1 cheats and loopholes video that I did. Thank you. I appreciate that. That went all over the place. The sharing of that was insane. I will be announcing tomorrow the lucky winners of signed copies of the book. So watch tomorrow's video for that. But thank you. Thank you again for everything that you've contributed to this one. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit like, hit share, and if you haven't already, hit subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow.